Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most testable and practically relevant topics on the BCBA exam, schedules of reinforcement, specifically concurrent, multiple, mixed, and chain schedules. Understanding these isn't just about memorizing definitions. It's about grasping how behavior is allocated across choices, how stimuli signal different contingencies, and how complex chains of behavior are maintained. On the exam, you'll see questions that ask you to distinguish between these schedule types, identify examples, and apply them to real-world scenarios. We'll break down concurrent schedules and the matching law, walk through step-by-step implementation, and directly compare multiple versus mixed schedules, a common point of confusion. We'll also look at exam statistics to show you where to focus your study time. By the end, you'll be able to confidently analyze any schedule question that comes your way. Let's get started. Concurrent schedules are a foundational concept for the BCBA exam because they directly test your understanding of choice and the matching law. In this arrangement, two or more independent schedules of reinforcement are simultaneously available for different behaviors, and a learner can freely switch between them. The critical feature is that behavior allocation, how much time or effort is devoted to each option, is measured across the schedules. According to the matching law, the proportion of responses directed toward an alternative matches the proportion of reinforcement it delivers. For clinical application, you might use a concurrent schedule in a preference assessment to compare the relative effectiveness of different reinforcers, such as praise versus access, to a preferred toy. For example, if a child can choose between two tasks, one yielding praise every 5 minutes and the other every 2 minutes, you would expect more time spent on the task with a higher reinforcement rate. On the exam, be ready to identify concurrent schedules when you see multiple behaviors being reinforced independently and simultaneously in a free operant context. When implementing concurrent schedules, the BCBA candidate must first define at least two distinct response options, each linked to its own independent schedule of reinforcement, such as one behavior on a fixed ratio schedule and another on a variable interval schedule. Next, you set those reinforcement schedules independently, ensuring that the delivery of reinforcement for one response does not alter the schedule for the other. The environment is then arranged so both options are simultaneously available, allowing the individual free choice without constraints. This is critical because it mirrors real-world settings where clients choose among competing reinforcers. Finally, you measure response allocation across options and compare it to the relative rates of reinforcement actually delivered. On the BCBA exam, expect questions that ask you to interpret data from a concurrent schedule, such as identifying which response is more likely based on the matching law. Understanding this step-by-step process helps you design interventions that respect client choice while systematically evaluating how reinforcement influences behavior. This slide compares three compound schedules that are frequently tested on the BCBA exam. In a multiple schedule, two or more schedules alternate in sequence, and each is signaled by a unique discriminative stimulus, or SD. For example, a red card might signal an FR5 schedule, while a green card signals a 6-2-minute schedule. Because the SDs control behavior, this arrangement is used to study stimulus control and discrimination. In contrast, a mixed schedule also alternate schedules, but no SDs signal, which is an effect. Behavior does not change predictably between components, making it useful for isolating the effects of the schedule itself without stimulus control. Finally, a chain schedule presents schedules in a fixed sequence, where completing one link produces the SD for the next, and each link ends with a conditioned reinforcer. For instance, completing FR5 on a red key produces the green key, signaling 6-2 minutes, leading to food. This arrangement is used to teach complex behavioral chains. On the exam, be prepared to distinguish these based on the presence or absence of SDs and the sequence of links. Domain B, Concepts and Principles, carries the heaviest weight on the BCBA exam with 24 score questions, making it the single largest domain you must master. Since Domain B accounts for 14% of all scored questions, every concept within it, especially schedule types, demands focused study. Task item B.10 is particularly critical because it requires you to identify and distinguish among concurrent, multiple, mixed, and chain schedules. The exam will test not just definitions, but your ability to recognize each schedule's unique features, such as the presence of discriminative stimuli or whether schedules operate simultaneously or sequentially. You can expect scenario-based questions where you must determine which schedule is in effect based on environmental cues. Given the high question count in Domain B, strong performance on schedule types can significantly boost your overall score. Prioritize practice with real-world examples and clear distinctions between these 4 schedules to avoid confusion on test day. Now let's look at mixed schedules. A mixed schedule involves 2 or more schedules of reinforcement that alternate in a sequence, but critically, no discriminative stimuli signal which schedule is currently in effect. Because there are no SDs present, the learner cannot reliably change their behavior when the schedule switches. This means there is no stimulus control, and the behavior pattern may look inconsistent. In research, mixed schedules are valuable because they allow us to study the effects of different schedule parameters, like ratio versus interval, without the confounding influence of stimulus control. For a clinical example, imagine a client who receives reinforcement on a VR5 schedule for 10 minutes, then switches to an FI2 schedule for 10 minutes, with no cues to indicate the change. The key contrast with multiple schedules is that multiple schedules use distinct SDs for each component, while mixed schedules do not. On the BCBA exam, if you see a question describing alternating schedules without any signal or cue, the correct answer is a mixed schedule. On this slide, we directly compare multiple and mixed schedules, a distinction you must master for the BCBA exam. In a multiple schedule, each component has a unique discriminative stimulus, or SD, like a red light signaling FR5 and a green light signaling 6-2. This creates stimulus control, so behavior changes with the SD. In a mixed schedule, there are no SDs. The same context applies to all schedules, so there is no stimulus control and behavior may not change across components. Clinically, a multiple schedule might use colored lights in a DTT session, while a mixed schedule might change the schedule every 5 minutes in the same room. For exam identification, look for distinct cues for each schedule. That's a multiple schedule. If you see alternating schedules without any cues, that's a mixed schedule. Understanding this difference is critical for interpreting experimental designs and for questions on stimulus control and schedule effects. A chain schedule is a powerful arrangement for building complex behavioral sequences, where each link in the chain has its own discriminative stimulus and schedule of reinforcement. In this setup, completing the first schedule produces a conditioned reinforcer, specifically the SD for the next link, until the terminal reinforcer is finally delivered. For example, an FR5 on a red key might produce the green key SD, signaling a 6-2 schedule, and only after that does food appear. This directly relates to how BCBAs use task analysis and chaining procedures to teach multi-step skills like hand washing or vocational tasks. On the exam, you need to recognize that each link's completion is reinforced by access to the next SD, not just the terminal reinforcer. Understanding this distinction from mixed or multiple schedules is critical for identifying how conditioned reinforcement maintains behavior across a chain. On this slide, we have the 4 schedule types you'll need to distinguish for the BCBA exam. Concurrent schedules present 2 or more schedules simultaneously, each for a different behavior, allowing free choice. Think of a pigeon in a chamber with 2 keys, each on its own schedule. This is key for measuring preference and behavior allocation, often assessed in matching law questions. Multiple schedules alternate schedules in sequence, each signaled by unique discriminative stimulus, so the learner can anticipate which schedule is in effect. In contrast, mixed schedules also alternate schedules but without any discriminative stimuli, meaning the learner cannot reliably predict the upcoming schedule, leading to less differentiated behavior. Finally, chain schedules involve a fixed sequence where each link ends with a conditioned reinforcer that also serves as the SD for the next link, like a rat pressing a lever to earn a tone that signals the next step. For the exam, focus on the presence or absence of SDs and whether schedules are simultaneous or sequential. Now, let's examine chain schedules, a concept you'll need to distinguish from multiple and mixed schedules on the BCBA exam. In a chain schedule, each component must be completed in a fixed sequence before the next becomes available, creating a clear sequential structure. Critically, the completion of each link produces a conditioned reinforcer, which also serves as the discriminative stimulus for the next link. This is a key distinction from multiple schedules, which alternate based on time rather than response completion. This structure aligns perfectly with task analysis steps, where each step is reinforced by access to the next step, and only the final link delivers the terminal reinforcer, such as praise or preferred item. For example, teaching hand washing might involve turning on water, FR1, getting soap, FR1, scrubbing, FI 30 seconds, rinsing and drying. On the exam, remember that chain schedules require you to complete one schedule to move to the next, not just wait for a time-based change. As we begin this segment, take a close look at this slide, which displays the BCBA exam question distribution by domain. This is your roadmap for the entire exam, showing you exactly how many questions to expect from each content area. For example, you'll see that the largest domain, behaviorism and philosophical foundations, carries the most weight, while other domains like measurement or experimental design have fewer questions. Understanding this distribution is critical for your study strategy. It tells you where to invest your time and effort most efficiently. If a domain has a high percentage of questions, you need deep mastery. If it's smaller, you can prioritize fluency without overstudying. This slide also highlights the interconnected nature of the domains. Concepts from one area often appear in questions from another. Keep this distribution in mind as we move through the remaining segments, because every topic we cover ties back to these domains and their relative importance on exam day. On this slide, we're clarifying the key differences between concurrent and chain schedules, a distinction you'll need for the BCBA exam, especially when designing assessments or chaining interventions. In a concurrent schedule, all schedules are available simultaneously, giving the learner free choice among options at any time, and each schedule delivers its own reinforcer independently. This setup is ideal for preference assessments or studying the matching law. In contrast, a chain schedule presents schedules in a fixed sequence. The learner must complete the current link before moving to the next, with only the terminal link delivering a primary reinforcer. Each link has a unique discriminative stimulus, which guides behavior through the chain. Common exam applications include using concurrent schedules to evaluate choice and preference, while chain schedules support task analysis and chaining procedures for teaching complex skills. Understanding these differences helps you select the right schedule for client goals and interpret behavioral outcomes accurately. On this slide, we're stepping back to consider how much emphasis the BCBA exam places on understanding concurrent, multiple, mixed, and chain schedules relative to other schedule types. While basic schedules like fixed ratio and variable interval appear frequently, these compound schedules are equally critical because they test your ability to analyze complex environmental arrangements, a key skill for real-world behavior change. The exam often asks you to distinguish between them by focusing on discriminative stimuli. Multiple schedules have distinct SDs for each component. Mixed schedules do not. Concurrent schedules allow simultaneous choice, and chain schedules link components with a terminal reinforcer. Expect scenario-based questions where you must identify which schedule is operating or predict how a behavior will shift under changing conditions. Mastering these distinctions isn't just about memorization. It's about demonstrating that you can design and evaluate interventions where multiple contingencies interact, which is exactly what the 6th edition emphasizes in task list items on schedule effects and discrimination training. As you wrap up your study of concurrent, multiple, mixed, and chain schedules, remember that the BCBA exam will test not just your ability to label these schedules, but to apply them in real-world scenarios. Concurrent schedules are all about choice and how behavior allocates across simultaneously available options, while chain schedules build complex sequences through distinct, discriminative stimuli. The key distinction between multiple and mixed schedules lies in the presence or absence of a correlated stimulus change, a subtle but critical difference that often appears on the exam. Mixed schedules test your understanding of reinforcement without clear cues, and chain schedules highlight the power of conditioned reinforcement in shaping multi-step behaviors. With schedule-type questions making up a notable portion of the task list, you need to be fluent in comparing these 4 arrangements. So take a deep breath, review your comparison charts, and practice identifying each schedule from a scenario. You've got the tools. Now go show the exam what you know.